Hello and welcome to this special video. The F1 season 2022 is over and all scheduled races have taken place. Woohoo! What began as a season that looked to bring us another awesome title fight was pretty much easy sailing for Max Verstappen and Red Bull in the end. Yet, we still had some good races but also rather not so good ones. And I thought it's time for another rating video. This time I'll be rating all races of the F1 season 2022. Maybe let's first go through the ratings and what I mean by them so that we can all discuss on the same basis. The S rating stands for absolutely brilliant, edge of my seat for the entire race, not even a short phase without action. S really needs to tick almost all the boxes, so don't expect many of them. Maybe only one or two races like this happen every season. A is for great races, very exciting, proper competition at the top and for the win as well. B is for enjoyable races, like maybe we didn't have a big battle for the win or just a disappointing DRS pass without any competition, but behind for the podium and all the midfield places there were some great and exciting battles, or maybe it wasn't that action-packed but very interesting strategy-wise. C is for average races, like not that much going on, but it's not like nothing is happening at all. Races where you go like, meh, like I don't feel like I wasted my time, but I won't watch a replay or highlights afterwards. D is for races that are like really boring, the ones where you fall asleep but at least get a good rest. E is just like S for very special occasions, the ones that are so tremendously bad that you're honestly questioning why you wasted your time so much. Like Spa 2021 or many of the Monaco Grand Prix in the last years, or of course the infamous 2019 French Grand Prix. Of course, those are just examples. You still can have a runaway win as an A for me when behind everything is just completely crazy, for example. I just wanted to get this out of the way so we have a benchmark. So now let's begin with the ratings. The season started with a great race in Bahrain. Ferrari dominance was expected, but instantly it was apparent that Red Bull were there too. Plus, it turned out Mercedes weren't sandbagging at all. It seemed like such a long time ago. The race had amazing fights up and down the grid, with the main focus being on the top two, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, who were battling wheel to wheel 3 laps in a row after their first pit stop. Unimaginable with earlier regulations, as Max would have needed to back down for a couple of laps to cool his tires. From then it looked like Charles was running away with it, but a late safety car bunched the field up once again. Right after that, Max had to retire due to mechanical issues, while Leclerc actually ran away with it. Carlos making the dream start for Ferrari perfect with a 1-2. Checo in the final lap also had to retire, adding to the chaos we had in this race. This one deserves an A for me. Like, it was great, but for an S, it needs to be very special, as I said. For the second race, we stayed in the Middle East. We were heading to Jeddah for the second time ever, and we expected chaos and drama. And drama we had on Friday when airstrikes hit oil tanks not far from the track. Kinda ridiculous in my opinion to still go on as if nothing happened, but that's what F1 did anyway. Checo put it on pole, surprising everyone, and a surprisingly event-lacking race began. Perez controlled the race at the front until he did his first pit stop. In the first stint, I only remember the Alpine battling heavily. Apart from that, there wasn't that much happening. Then drama for Checo, an unfortunate safety car allowed Max and the two Ferraris a free pit stop that left Perez in 4th. Then we had another battle for the lead between Charles and Max, but that was not nearly as good as the one in Bahrain, as it was a little ridiculous because they both tried to go last into the final corner to get DRS on the main straight. Didn't nearly enjoy that as much as the proper battle in Bahrain. Then in the end, I feel like we were denied a last charge by Charles, who came pretty close, but a yellow flag on the pit straight denied him a last charge in the final 2 laps. Could have been an A, decided to go for a B because of the ridiculousness of the DRS. But we'll see later that DRS is pretty vital for a good race, because what happens if it isn't there at all is nothing that is too exciting. Here's the first controversial one in terms of my ratings. Many didn't like Australia because it was pretty much a runaway win from pole for Leclerc with not much competition at the top. And it could have, at the time, indicated sheer Ferrari and Leclerc dominance. How wrong we were in hindsight. Max, with his second DNF of the season, although he wouldn't even have been able to challenge Charles for the win if his car didn't break down, Leclerc and his car were just too good in Melbourne. Yet I still enjoyed this race pretty much. In the midfield there was a lot of battles going on, and we saw once again the new cars really do provide better racing. I don't think the new Melbourne layout did too much for that, but the cars worked. You could still follow close for many laps, and because Melbourne still is not a track where it's easy to overtake, we had some proper battles. I enjoy that much more than something like, yeah, I'll just open my DRS, breeze past slower cars and disappear into the distance. Slower cars holding faster drivers up and giving them a proper run for their money is something I really enjoy. Thus, I enjoyed Australia. This one gets a B. Here we are for the first major letdown. I'm only rating the proper race, not the sprint by the way, as I can't really rate them fairly because I don't really enjoy that format altogether. But I was so excited when I saw a wet track, just like in 2021, and remember the banger we got there. This time though, wow, there was Sainz being taken out at the start, and then that was almost it. We had the pit stops for dries. Charles dropped to third after running behind Max before the pit stops, and then sometimes he got close to Checo, but there was just no flipping DRS. They were running almost half the race on dry tires without allowing DRS. Max would have won one way or another, but at least we could have seen Charles at least properly battling Perez after the first pit stops, but it wasn't to be. No chance against the RB and their straight line speed. It was just so annoying to see. Also in the midfield, yeah, we could have had some great battles right now if we just had DRS. So all we saw was Lewis stuck in the midfield without straight line speed and Charles Leclerc getting too desperate and binning it at Variante Alta. This one could have easily been a C, maybe even a B, but without DRS for way too long, it just deserves a D for me. Miami. That one got so much hype, at least from the official side. And I always love the first race at a new venue and want to be entertained as no one knows the track yet and has too much data, so the recipe for a good race is definitely there. In reality though, it was meh. Leclerc leading from pole, the Ferrari really being very hard to the tires, so Max caught up and passed him easily in the first stint, and from then everything looked set. Luckily, Gasly and Norris at least somewhat turned it around when they brought out the safety car in the last third of the race. That made it a little exciting. Charles got a lot closer to Max and managed to stay there, giving us hope for another battle for the win. Though it never came, as Charles, despite his best efforts, was never really close enough to make a move against Max. But at least it got us all a little excited. Apart from that, there was a nice battle between Perez and Sainz, as well as heartbreak for the German fans when Mick, on the way to his first points, took out Vettel in the process. That was really sad. The late safety car and the little excitement at the end save the inaugural Miami Grand Prix a C. Well, after two not-so-good races, it was time for a better one. The only problem, Barcelona was next, and that's not really known for good races, is it? But the first half started pretty exciting, honestly. Some midfield battles, Sainz and Verstappen catching headwind into turn 4, spinning into the gravel, just barely making it out, Leclerc leading commandingly from pole only for his engine to give in, and all of a sudden it looked like a Sergio Perez race, as Max, because of his spin, stuck behind Russell, the two having some great battling as Max had issues with his DRS. He'd probably have breezed past easily without them, but like it was very exciting. But then strategy set Max free and he was catching Perez on an alternate strategy quickly. Secretly, inside me I knew that this would happen, but I really hoped they let them race as it was so early in the season, Perez not too far behind Max in the championship, so first I was angry that they pulled team orders. Realistically, that's what makes the difference between a championship winning team like Red Bull and the utter disaster that is Ferrari. That was their chance to make up the ground they lost with Max and his DNFs, and we all know, even if we all wanted to see Checo fight for the championship, Max is RB's number one, and rightfully so. Checo is way too inconsistent and Max is just quick everywhere. So, after my anger about the team order so early in the season settled, I think Red Bull did the right thing. At that point, it even still seemed like Ferrari could mount a huge challenge, and they even looked a little better car-wise, but still, for the racing, it would have been better if they let Checo race. He would have even had the chance to win with Max DRS problems that weekend, but still, thanks to the many twists and turns in the first half, the Spanish Grand Prix gets a B. I was preparing for boredom for this race, but it came a little different, at least at first. Before we get into the rating of the actual Monaco Grand Prix, let's just dream about what could have happened. We could have started the race regularly on time when there was no or just slight rain, then heavy rainfall kicks in. The drivers have to pit, gamble on inters versus full wets, the running order will get absolutely crazy, red flag because the rain is too heavy, restart with a completely mixed up grid, people gambling again on when to stop for dries, more mix up in the aftermath, and then either the regular Monaco procession, but at least in a crazy order, or more action because drivers, probably the two Ferraris, having to make up ground for wrong strategy calls and actually battling much slower cars in Monaco. What we got was a delayed start when the rain was gone on a drying track, and that part was really good. A or B race material. Gasly making impressive moves, Ferrari messing up the strategy with the dries to lose a probably safe 1-2. Checo impressively leading the race, but after mix crash to bring out the red, it was the usual Monaco procession that deserves no more than an E. With the race being started on time, this could have easily been an A or an B, maybe even an S, depending on how good everything would have turned out, but like that, I generously gave it a C, as until everyone pitted for dries, it was really good still. But the delayed start probably killed a very memorable race. By the way, I read that it wasn't even because of the forecast that the start was delayed, but a malfunctioning starting light, so maybe it wasn't even race direction's fault for once. For me, as a Ferrari fan, the last races really hurt, and Azerbaijan didn't really do better. At least if Ferrari or one of the drivers messes it up, I hope that I at least could look forward to an exciting and chaotic race still, but this time Baku didn't deliver at all. It kinda was like the disappointing 2016 inaugural race there again. High expectation not being met at all. No proper action that I can remember, and then we were even denied a Charles vs Max battle on the different strategies, although this would have probably easily gone to Max, but we were even denied the fight as Charles' engine gave in once again, leaving us with a commanding victory for Max and the feeling that this season might not become as great as I thought it'd be after the first couple of races. This race gets another D. Canada now finally could become a more memorable race than the other ones. Leclerc, because of the two engine blowouts, had to start from the back as he fitted new parts, leaving Sainz to hunt down Max for him, and a wild Alonso starting from the front row that left us all, maybe apart from Max fans, hoping that the Maestro would lead into turn 1 and build his trademark Alonso train behind him. In the beginning we saw Charles making moves, moving up the grid, but then all of a sudden he was stuck behind the Alpines as the Ferrari was lacking traction all of a sudden, an area where they were actually very good the entire season up until that point. Alonso didn't live up to his promise attacking into turn 1, I slightly feel if it was Hamilton who started alongside him he would have tried a little harder. He's still not over that 2007 season, I believe. Pretty much a C race up until that point when we got a late safety car and Sainz hunting down Max, in the end fighting for his first race win in F1 but never being close enough to properly attack. But it was very exciting for like 10 laps or so because it really seemed like Carlos may do it at one point other than it looked like in Miami. So this one gets a B. It was a long time since we had the last really awesome race. I guess we were spoiled after that 2021 season where pretty much every race was very exciting apart from a few exceptions. But Silverstone usually delivers, and so it was in 2022. Sainz starting from pole position, losing the lead with a poor start, but the race was soon red flagged as a huge crash involving Joe and Russell worried us all when we didn't see the pictures for a long time. Luckily nothing happened, and so we started again in the original running order. Sainz this time slamming the door on Max, retaining the lead, Charles and Checo tangling on the second opening lap that this time went through, leaving Charles' car slightly damaged. Max then getting closer and closer to Sainz again, who slipped off the road going through the S's. This could have meant another runaway win for Max, but he ran over debris, damaging his floor, leaving him in the midfield shortly afterwards. This was Ferrari's chance to bounce back. Do a team order, give Charles an easy win without competition, who was closing up to Carlos despite a damaged car, but they decided to do nothing. Same situation after the pit stops, Charles losing more time behind Carlos until they finally came to senses to let Charles through. Hamilton, by the way, creeping closer, looking like he could even go faster than the Ferraris, at least than Sainz, giving him a shot at a surprise home win. When everything looked settled, a late safety car changed things completely when Ferrari decided not to pit Charles for softs, leaving him out on old hards, deciding to only pit Carlos for softs to hold up everyone else, who of course was pitting for softs as well. Surprise, surprise, Carlos had enough of Ferrari inventing and muscled past taking his first win. Charles amazingly battled with Lewis and Checo for some laps to give us some of the best on-track racing we've seen lately. Especially spectacular was him passing Lewis back around the outside of Copse with old hard tires. What a move! Sadly, it wasn't rewarded with Charles still dropping from the podium, only making up a few points when it could have easily been a big chunk. Ferrari losing him the second race of the season because of poor strategy. Don't worry, it won't be the last. This race had everything. Battles at the front, very unforeseeable, drama, maybe even little controversy, oh, and amazing midfield battles as well that I didn't even mention. Not least impressive Mick battling Max in the final laps of the race, finally scoring his first points in Formula 1. Heck, it even gave us one of the best Ferrari meme templates. This is it, this is the one that gets the S. And the good racing continued. Of course, Spielberg always has its nice battles and derpy collisions into turn 4, if sometimes only in the midfield. Most of us were preparing for another Max Verstappen and Red Bull commanding victory, but not this time though. Red Bull struggled with the tires, so it was easy to pass for Charles after a while. Then Max pitted earlier, undercut Charles, who overtook again, and even another time. In the last stint, even Sainz was about to pass Max for a Ferrari 1-2, but disaster struck for Ferrari once again. His car caught fire and he was out of the race, bringing out the VSC. Then the top two went for another stop, neglecting Charles' advantage on the tires so that Max might get another chance. Heart-stopping moment for all Ferrari fans, the team radio message popped up. Charles had an issue with his throttle that wasn't fully releasing, meaning he was driving with around 10 to 20% throttle through the final laps, even if he was completely off the pedal. Max crept closer and closer, but ultimately Leclerc made it and won the Austrian Grand Prix. The first time he was even on the podium after Miami. With probably the fastest car and after Miami without any fault of his own. He's haunted with bad luck, I tell you. Add great midfield battles and on-track action to the excitement at the front and you get another A. Haha, let's just give France an E because the runoff is ugly. LOL. But if you know my F1 track ratings, I like Paul Ricard. The main issue is really just the ugly runoff. The track itself is fine. And I think we even saw that in this year's race. Sure, it wasn't great and will be forgotten pretty quickly, but there was good racing and on-track action going on this year as well. Leclerc fended off Max from the start, only to crash on his own while spinning into the Bousset. As there was no gravel, he hit the wall and was out of the race. and that was a major letdown. From that point on, it was easy sailing for Max at the front, and we were denied a battle that could have been very similar to the 2021 battle between the Mercs and Red Bull, which I very much enjoyed. But the race was still quite okay, Sainz making moves and entertaining us after starting from the back, courtesy of Ferrari's poor reliability, then another Ferrari strategy shitshow, asking Sainz what he wants when he was stuck behind Perez, only to deny him a pit stop when he wanted to pit. Then, when he muscled down Perez with a fantastic move, being side by side for many corners, Ferrari asked him to pit. He probably wouldn't even have made it to the end, but at that point it was even too late to make up some ground on fresh tires. Bravo Ferrari, bravo. Then another battle between Perez and Russell for the final podium place that went to Russell after he caught Checo napping at the VSC restart. That, plus some midfield battles, deserve an average C. But sure, go on and call Paul Ricard worse than Monaco just because we had a terrible race there in 2019. The others in 18 and 22 were average, with 2021 being very good. I will even miss it because, in my opinion, France deserves an F1 race. Now, we French and German fans can go crying together because we don't have an F1 race anymore. What a funny story with the Hungaroring. In theory, it should rarely produce good races because the track is too narrow and the straights too short to properly race in F1 cars. But actually, there have been a lot of great races here in recent days. More good ones than the bad ones to expect even. And 2022 delivered again. Maybe Ferrari's last chance to get back into the championship, with Max having issues in qualifying who started from P10. Russell getting a shock pole position. In the race, rain was expected towards the end of it, which of course never came. It's always like that, isn't it? But we didn't even need that. Verstappen making moves, different strategies for the Ferraris and Russell, resulting in a great battle between George and Charles, plus another major Ferrari strategy mess-up that cost Charles another win, and the team probably a double podium was more than enough for a good race. Max won from P10, overtaking Charles twice after he spun the first time. No Ferrari on the podium, but both Mercedes, was not what we would have expected. This one definitely is another A, getting close to an S even, but I'll remain with an A. After that race, the summer break began at the championship was pretty much decided, if we're being honest. Luckily, not the final race we saw in Belgium for quite a while, and it had great race written all above it. Verstappen and Leclerc starting from way down the field, an entire mixed up grid thanks to many grid penalties, and did it deliver? No, unfortunately not really. Max was up into the podium places in no time, and it wasn't very hard to get past Sainz and Perez as well. From there, it was easy sailing for him, really impressive from Max there. As for Charles, well, he had his usual luck. Tear off in the brakes after lap 1, had to pit. From there it was pretty much over for him, as it was clear he wouldn't be able to finish higher than 5th. There were some nice battles in the midfield as well, probably the greatest overtake of the season from Ocon, but a lot of the time there was pretty much nothing going on. Don't get me wrong, Spa is an awesome track, but it has been quite a while since we last saw a properly good and exciting race here, hasn't it? At least we saw a race this time and some midfield action to make it a C for me. Surprisingly, after a disappointing Belgian Grand Prix, the following race in Zandvoort was a lot better. From the get-go, it was pretty obvious that strategy would play a very interesting part, and finally with Red Bull, Ferrari and even Mercedes looking quick. In the race, Ferrari couldn't keep up with Max and Red Bull and struggled on tires, but oh my, Mercedes on their alternates one-stop strategy looked like they could fight Max for the win. They were of course denied that when Tsunoda brought out the VSC in very strange circumstances that even was very convenient for their sister team and Max, which led to a lot of tinfoil hats being brought out. Bottas then brought his old friends at Mercedes back into contention, only for Mercedes pulling a Ferrari and leaving Lewis out on old tyres versus a hard-charging Max on new softs, who of course lost position after his stop but immediately took it back. The drama and strategic action at the front, as well as some interesting midfield battles, have me kind of split between an A and a B, but I'm ultimately going for a B, since comparing this one to other A's like Hungary or Austria, these were just all that little bit better. The Italian Grand Prix kinda symbolizes the season as a whole. Could have been very awesome, became quite boring with Max winning comfortably. Along the way, Ferrari chose the wrong strategy for Charles in the lead of the race, though not as much as they messed up in Monaco or Hungary earlier in the season. Some enjoyable midfield battles showed that the regs are working and Latifi getting absolutely humiliated. It just showed everything what was making this season that started so promising such a huge disappointment. Red Bull's car being pretty dominant after a few issues at the beginning of the season, but Checo not really being better than Albon in the second Red Bull. Ferrari standing in their own way, and even with all of that, Max and Red Bull even have the luck on their side with weird safety car situations that feel like always favoring them. Not a conspiracy theory there, just pointing that out. It was meh, but at least there was some stuff going on in the midfield with Sainz's great charge and De Vries debut points. Singapore was a race of two halves, the first one being an absolute snooze fest, straight E rating, and that is a pattern I'm starting to realize. A wet track that takes ages to dry is pretty terrible for an F1 race, with everyone going on inters for ages, with nothing really happening on track and everyone just waiting for the crossover point, but when that came, oh my, was it good! A lot of safety cars with people going off, most notably in Hamilton and Verstappen, which is quite unusual from both of them, though their race didn't end with their mishap, but still. And what a battle it was between Perez and Leclerc, first on track when Leclerc came very close to making a move multiple times, and then when it became pretty much a time trial because Perez was about to be penalized for multiple safety car infringements and needed to pull a gap to Leclerc to make up the time he'll potentially lose by one or more 5-second penalties. What a race, if not for the stewarding, which was absolutely horrible as they didn't decide how to penalize Perez during the race, though it was pretty clear that he left too much of a gap to the safety car, and then I feel like race direction didn't want to influence the final results afterwards because it would shine a light on them not being able to make a good decision during or just very shortly after the race. The final decision on just penalizing Perez once with a 5-second penalty despite breaking the rules pretty obviously 3 times is a little strange and not lenient in how this was handled earlier, and even how this was handled at the US Grand Prix when Gasly instantly for the first infringement received a 5-second penalty. That almost drags it down into a B rating, but still an awesome drive by Perez and a race that had me very entertained. Get up into ATM8. Well, the Japanese Grand Prix is hard to judge for me. It seemed to become another Spa 21 with at least one lap of racing for the red flag, but then with the delay we got to start the race properly and it was pretty decent. Not the best rain race, but the half an hour of racing we did get was still good and had some memorable moments, like Russell making some really good moves or the awesome finish between Alonso and Vettel. After the race, confusion about whether Max had actually won the title or not, because it turned out the FIA got the wording wrong in their new regulations to have a better way to award points on shortened races, which turned out to be an absolute mess. As long as the time runs out, you will get full points, no matter if you had the race on pause for 1 hour and 50 minutes and there were just 3 laps raced. If you cross the line after 2 hours, you receive full points. So Max won it, but the celebrations were pretty awkward, understandably. A B for the half an hour of racing has to be scaled down to a C, since about 3/4 of the race didn't take place at all. So Suzuka's return after COVID was not the best of races. Austin, after Italy, was the first race where we actually went the full distance, and it was a properly good one finally. Thanks to Mercedes stepping up to take Ferrari's role of Red Bull's challengers and doing a better job than the prancing horse did with a better car for every race since Austria. At one point I really believed Lewis would take it and keep the streak up, but it wasn't to be when Max passed him in the end. Quite the drama with track limits to the line, but ultimately they didn't stand a chance against Max and Red Bull. But that was not the only great thing. There were battles, awesome fights and lots of overtakes up and down the grid, and that just once more proves that purpose-built tracks are just better than this Miami and Vegas fake street circuit crap. And the atmosphere, like it always is in Austin, was great as well. A for the one and only real United States Grand Prix. I can without any doubt say that this was the worst race of the season. This one is on the same level as France 2019. Absolute crap. I feel like we deserve an award for staying awake for this one. Was there really anything interesting going on? Looked like strategy could be interesting at first, but pretty early we saw that this was not happening. Mercedes still doing a better job than Ferrari in challenging Red Bull. Horrendous performance from the prancing horse in that race. Amazing performance from Ricciardo though. Finally some redemption. Shame it had to be in the worst race of the season, but at least he got pretty much all of the attention. Great crowd as well, but they really deserve a better race. This is the one and only E this season. The Brazilian Grand Prix weekend overall was pretty much one of the best this season. Could be a candidate for an S as well. Qualifying was mad, the sprint was probably the first really good and interesting sprint we ever had, and I'm excluding last year's Brazil sprint as that was pretty much a special occasion with Lewis starting from the back, but out of these three, the main race was probably the weakest, though that doesn't mean it was bad at all. It started with an instant safety car as Daniel Ricciardo didn't make his future in F1 look any better, and after the restart, well, there was pure chaos. Lewis and Max coming together for a brief revival of 2021, and maybe that is a sign of what is to come in 2023 with the resurgent Mercedes maybe? Plus Norris taking out Leclerc now had two top drivers at the back for a recovery drive. From that point onwards, Russell pretty much controlled the race. Lewis climbed up the ladder up to P2, a lot of overtakes and battles in the midfield, lots of different strategies, but it was always kind of clear how the top four would finish. The middle part of the race was a bit slow to be honest, but then a late safety car bunched everyone up. There was some action after the restart, though the highly anticipated Merc battle for the win didn't come as George just kept Lewis out of the DRS window. Behind there was lots of teammate drama. Ocon not really wanting to help Alonso after they tangled on Saturday, Leclerc begging for team orders in the fight for P2 in the championship and not getting them, RB wanting to give Max team orders to let Checo through, which he didn't do, and a pretty, let's call it difficult team radio didn't really help Max's likability. After all what Checo has done for him, and especially last season, that was some shitty behavior by Max. Hope Checo keeps that in mind for 2023. What we can conclude is that there sure was some drama in the end. That saves it an A, even though it looked like a B at best for most of the time. But Interlagos has once again proven what a great track it is. I honestly can't say I wasn't that much looking forward to Abu Dhabi, but apparently I was pleasantly surprised. The expected Red Bull dominance for another 1-2 turned into a pretty interesting battle for P2 in the championship, with Checo and Charles being put on different strategies, and for a change, it was Leclerc and Ferrari coming out on top. Apart from that, there were a lot of interesting battles in the midfield, especially at the beginning of the race. Vettel looking good on the last race of his career, unlike Aston Martin's strategy. At least he took a final point in his last race. Mick not leaving a good impression on what most likely was his last race as well. And as much as I like him, but maybe getting Hülkenberg back was not the worst move of all times by Haas. Oh, and that could have been Daniel's last race in F1 as well, and he was pretty pale, but at least finished in the points. Abu Dhabi gets a B from me, but only because of that very interesting battle for second in the championship, and that once more proves that Abu Dhabi usually only is good or interesting when there's actually something to play for. If this was in the middle or the beginning of the season, this would have been a C at best, maybe even a D. Well, and that was all. 22 races in 2022. A season that started very promising and in the second half at least became quite the one-sided borefest we were hoping to leave behind after 2020. Overall, I'd give this season a C. Not that bad, it certainly had its good moments, but ultimately I don't think many people will remember it for that long. But as Mercedes heavily improved towards the end of the season, RB got punished with decreased testing time for breaking the cost cap in 2021, and Ferrari already working heavily on new and improved ways to mess up, maybe we have an exciting season coming up in 2023. In the end, only time will tell. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Check out my channel to see more. If you enjoy classic F1 racing, for example, I can recommend you my classic F1 season Automobilista 2, where I'm currently revisiting the 2012 season, and I have got something very big planned for 2023 as well, so stay tuned and subscribe to not miss anything, and I hope to see you all very soon. Until then, goodbye.